The session is open for questions.
Yeah.
I am Deepak Johnson from Department of Humanities and Social Sciences. Sir, you talked about being different, but taking Sanskrit as a representative of Indian culture or Indian civilization is narrow for me. Because core of Indian civilization is not Sanskrit alone. And why don't we mention about Tamil conference? Or the question can be, is there a pan-Indian culture as you would talk about? For me, to use your terminology, I found that other civilizations are being digested by Sanskrit. So, how do you respond to this view?
Yeah, it's an important question. There is this view, which is also a European view. There is a previous book I wrote called Breaking India. Previous book, which just came out in February, which talks about this whole history of the Aryan-Dravidian divide, starting 200 years ago. Because until Bishop Caldwell started this concept of a Dravidian race and a Dravidian identity, linguistic separation, religious separation, racial separation, if you look at the earlier classics, within the Tamil classics, there is no sense of the others being, being outsiders, being opposed to them or being tense. This tension, which has been created, is a product of the last 200 years. You do not see evidence from the Tamil literature side of having tension or anxiety about the non-Tamil culture. So that's one part I want to say there. Tamil itself has a large percentage of Sanskrit words and vice versa. There are about 20%, I attended a conference somewhere, about 20 or 25% common words. And there is the concept of Sanskriti. In this book, there is a difference between Sanskrit and Sanskriti. Sanskriti is a culture and a civilization, not a language. So you go to Southeast Asia, where they don't know Sanskrit, but there is a Sanskriti in the ideas that they are presenting. So for instance, non-history-centrism, history-centrism being the Judeo-Christian Abrahamic approach of a linear sequence of historical events which is absolute, without which you cannot get your salvation. It is the only history that happened, it's unique, and all other histories that differ must be negated and whatever. Tamil literature does not talk history-centrism. So the first major difference that I talk about in this book, which is history-centrism versus non-history-centrism, is shared with Tamil literature using a different language, but the Sanskriti of ideas is common. The second big difference I talk about is the sense of unity. The sense of unity, being integral unity, is in the Shaiva Siddhantas and Tirukural in the Tamil literature. In my earlier book, Breaking India, talks about that in great length. And my co-author is a Tamil gentleman living in Kanyakumari. That book is also available. I don't know if they have it here. But this whole issue of Tamil, non-Tamil, Dravidian, Aryan, all that, in that book we've covered it in detail. Now, the idea of non-translatability, in fact, in here I give examples like, a dosa should not be translated as a paratha or a pancake or a pizza, because it loses the experience that certain people have who have come up with this dish, and their way of preparing it and their way of experiencing it, describing it, is very unique. So I give my example using Sanskrit. That doesn't mean that other languages don't have distinctiveness. In fact, I also say that there are non-translatables in Arabic. There are non-translatables in Mandarin. So if you have the different civilizations with different historical experiences captured in their own unique words, those ought to be preserved, and there's no reason to digest Tamil into Sanskrit. I mean, others may be doing it. I am not in favor of that. I in fact prefer that regional languages of India should be preserved, not just Tamil, but every regional language should be preserved. And what bothers me is that these languages are being downsized in the number of schools and publications and replaced with English. That is a matter of concern. I realize that English being so powerful, there is no point in, it's a futile idea trying to fight English, so we are all English speaking. So my proposal is that everybody who comes from a certain language, so you come from Tamil, that's fine for you. Somebody comes from, Marathi and whatever, should take non-translatables of their language, which they think are very, very critical. Not the whole language, but take certain words which are non-translatable and introduce them into English, teach other people about it. So I'm planning on introducing 50 to 75 or so Sanskrit words, explain why they cannot be translated to English, like Shakti can't be called energy. It's just not this way. There are certain words like that. And it's very common to mistranslate them just to be easy. And the same thing should be done for another language. So I have no problem with that. I mean, I'm not saying that Tamil should be replaced with Sanskrit or any of that. That would be a contradiction from my point of view.
European philosophy is trying to make universal claims. Doesn't Indian systems of philosophy try to create a universal explanation? What's your view on that?
I think there is a difference between a claim of universalism and universalism. There's a difference between truth and truth claim. Truth claim means somebody says this is my claim of truth. So in a court, two opposing truth claims come to the table. Right? Each is trying to prove the point. So claims made by philosophy are truth claims. And I think what the gentleman intended, as I understand it, and certainly my view is that we should view the different ideas of different civilizations as truth claims and a seat at the table with no one privileged. But unfortunately the West has privileged itself because of its military power over the last 500 years and imposed its version as the universal version for everybody. And in the final chapter, what I propose is a sort of a round table or a parliament of civilizations where we are all making our claims, each one claiming that I understand the truth. That is our starting point. And in this book, I did not want to take that, assume that I'm going to speak for all the parties around the table and conclude who's right. That would be arrogant. So I merely want difference in the sense that I'm sufficiently different from the dominant Western culture that I deserve a seat at the table, but so does X and so does Y. Yeah? So I'm not the only one, but they all deserve a seat at the table. So this Congress of Philosophies or Dialogue of Civilizations, as the gentleman said, or a kind of a roundtable discussion of different worldviews is the right approach for humanity to go forward. And then I think the excellent point was made was that Indians are in a unique position to do this because we have this sense of non-exclusivity. There is not my way or no way. That is not, we don't have. My way is the best way for me. But maybe some other way is good for you. So I enjoy my dosa, but you can enjoy pizza and not bother me. It's like that. Now, so the person who's a Shaivite says that Shiva is my universal. But I have no problem that something else is your universal. That is a big issue. Exclusivity versus non-exclusivity is a very, very serious problem because large part of the world crisis today in terms of the religious and ideological conflicts which are getting worse, and they're not going to go away in your lifetime, let me tell you that, they're going to get pretty bad, it has to do with exclusivity claims. And these exclusivity claims come from traditions based on history-centrism. You see, let me give you this example. The status of Jesus in Islam and in Christianity are incompatible. In Christianity, he must be son of God and not just another prophet. In Islam, he is a great prophet, but not son of God. But this is not a trivial matter. You see, in Christianity, there is original sin. Adam and Eve do something, and that is called original sin. So God curses them that all their future progeny, means everybody born, their offspring, is condemned to eternal damnation. Eternal damnation. Not finite damnation, but infinite, eternal damnation. Nobody can. So no human being who is progeny of Adam and Eve, and everybody is, has the capacity to get out of this on their own. So the only solution is God has to take birth as Jesus and suffer on behalf of everybody else so that the problem can be solved. But there's one more hitch. This is where the Islam will have a problem. If God takes birth as human progeny, then he is born sinner also. So if Jesus were born through male-female sexuality, father-mother, not virgin birth, but human father, human mother, then by virtue of the curse of given to all progeny of Adam and Eve, Jesus would also be progeny of Adam and Eve, and therefore born as a sinner. And if he's born as a sinner, he's not going to solve other people's problems. He is himself a sinner. So the only human being in the history of humanity, before Jesus, after Jesus, the only human being ever born, not a sinner, has to be born by virgin birth, which means God impregnates. It's not progeny of Adam and Eve, but God impregnates. And because God impregnates, therefore it violates the requirement of being progeny, because it's not father, mother. Therefore, he is the only person born free of original sin. Therefore, he can serve the purpose and solve the problem. Now, Islam, while respecting Jesus, do not accept virgin birth and Son of God. Why? Because suppose you accept that suppose the Islam theologian would, and I've done all this manthan with all these guys, by the way, suppose Islam were to accept that Jesus is Son of God, then the Prophet in Islam cannot supersede Son of God. Cannot. It's like you have Vice Chancellor and he is issued some instructions, he's the highest authority. Somebody may be professor or dean or head of department, he cannot supersede. Son of God is God himself incarnate through virgin birth, and a regular prophet who's a mortal human being cannot update. So it's like Windows 7, you can only have Microsoft produce Windows 8. I cannot produce something and say it's Windows 8. They won't accept it. Because if they were to accept it, that Rajiv has come up with Windows 8, then they're finished, they're out of business. So if Christians were to accept the claim that Muhammad supersedes, which is the Islamic claim, that Christianity is good, Jesus was a prophet, but there is a new prophet. So there was release X, now we got X plus 1. That's the Islamic claim. If that is required for Islam to be valid. Otherwise, why would you need it? If that is the Son of God, is fine. There is no other Son of God. So a prophet cannot supersede Son of God. Therefore, they have to downgrade Jesus from Son of God to prophet. Jesus is only a prophet according to Islam, not a Son of God. Now you go back and ask the Christians, are you willing to accept that? They'll say, hell no. How can we accept it? Because if he's just a regular prophet, no matter how good, then the new prophet might as well go for the latest release. You see? So this is incompatibility between the two of them because they are both history-centric. They cannot resolve this problem without one or the other being compromised. Never. That's just the way it is. Now, another example of the same point is that there is this book of Revelation in the Bible, which says that there will be a second arrival of Jesus, second arrival of Christ, and then all problems will be solved, there will be no more evil, this will be like eternal, everything wonderful going on. But there is something human beings have to do as a precondition. Human beings, according in this book, have to restore the kingdom of Israel to its original state. Restore the kingdom of Israel to its original state. Why do you think all this war is going on? You have to understand the religious conflict behind it. It's not just political war for territory. It is required to restore the kingdom of Israel. Now the kingdom of Israel, the center thing in it was a temple called the Temple of David. The Temple of David is today a mosque. So restoring the kingdom of David would require taking over that mosque. The Jews have to take over the mosque and remove the mosque and make a Temple of David again. This is required in the book of Revelation in the Bible as a precondition for Christ to come back again. So on the one hand, there is this belief which says this mosque must be taken and turned back into the Temple of David. Yeah? But that mosque is not an ordinary mosque. That is the mosque from where Muhammad reached paradise. His final departure for paradise happened in that spot. They built a mosque there. So history-centrism of one requires destroying the history-centrism of the other in both directions. So when you have a tradition stuck on history-centrism and it has a collision with another history-centric religion, it is a battle to the end. Because if there is, for me to be legitimate, you are violating my legitimacy, I have to finish you off. It's that kind of a thing. So my sense is that Indian thought as represented here, its strength being non-history centric is a very unique strength. I have been asked to mediate dialogues and encounters among where in Princeton there was some group doing Jewish, Christian and Islamic discussion. So they told me about it. So I said, why didn't you invite a Hindu and a Buddhist and a Jain? And they said, well, because we don't have problems with them, we have problems with each other. So I said, rather than excluding me, maybe I got a solution. So why do you have only people around the table who got problems? Maybe you should have somebody around the table who got a solution. So we said, what would be your approach? I said, my approach would be to try and convince them that if they can dilute and reduce their history centrism, they can still respect their history but not exclusively. They can still respect their great exemplars but not in a literal history. That approach which we have might allow them to coexist and live together. So this lady was so impressed, she wrote in this book, I've quoted her, towards the end of chapter 2, she wrote an editorial in her magazine saying that there is this one guy, he comes up with a very original idea, we guys never thought of it. And this is his idea that we are history-centric and that is our problem. And so this is considered, this insight that they are history-centric and needn't be, and history-centrism is the problem, is positioned in their debate as a very big breakthrough for them. Very big breakthrough for them. So that's the Indian contribution, in my opinion. Yes.
I just wondered whether we are mixing up history with myths, because a lot of what about Jesus and then the subsequent events may not be part of history but part of the myth.
For you. But ask a well-informed Christian theologian, are you willing to accept Jesus as myth? You see, we project ourselves because we are able to deal with it comfortably. The reason for historicity has to do with man having original sin which cannot be redeemed. We are incapable of solving that problem as human beings. There is no reincarnation. You have one life. You're born a sinner and you cannot solve the problem on your own. You can pray, you can do what you want. Until God comes, takes an incarnation through virgin birth, so he is not himself a sinner, and through that only he can suffer for you. So God came and suffered for you on the cross. This piece of history, if it is myth, it means that there is no redemption from sin possible today. This cannot be myth. This is the Christian doctrine. And if you want to search under Nicene Creed, Nicene, Creed, C-R-E-E-D. We need to understand somebody else. In Purva Paksha, I understand somebody according to their doctrine, not according to what I think they ought to believe. That's not Purva Paksha. Purva Paksha means I start by listening to him, saying, you please explain to me what is your belief. And then only I can respond to it. And the Christian belief in Nicene Creed is a requirement. You look at Methodist, Baptist, Catholic, you look at various major denominations, maybe some on the margins are different, but you look at major denominations of Christianity and you look at their websites and there you have a search, so you put in Nicene Creed, they'll tell you the Nicene Creed is all literal history, no myth allowed there, literal history as a requirement for membership. So you can keep thinking it's all myth, but then it's not Christianity, it is your idea of Christianity.
I'm sorry, I think I wasn't understood properly. Maybe I could explain a little further.
Sure.
Jesus could be a part of the historicity that we are talking of.
Yes.
But the concepts that we explain that comes subsequently after Jesus, perpetrated either by the church or by the Islamic community where they have their own ideology, they could be part of the ideological warfare as a result of the myths that have been incorporated somehow into the historicity.
Give me an example of what you would consider a Christian myth, and I will tell you, let's ask a Christian whether he's willing to call it a Christian myth. Because you see, you are so comfortable, the part of the book you should read is called Itihas versus History. I describe this point. I use Itihas and contrast it with history. And I use Itihas as not the same thing as history. Itihas is a different meaning which is more flexible and not linear. Many parallel stories could be going on and different things could be happening. We can accept all of them. And Itihas is flexible in the sense that we can adapt it and update it for the present context and reinterpret the past in the present context. But history, the word comes from his story. His is God. It is God's story. That is how the word, the etymology of the word history, it comes from. And that is a literal event. You see, you must understand that in our tradition, man is Satchitanand, means he is God, he is one with Brahman. So we have no infinite gap between us and Brahman because Brahman is all pervading. So we are intimately with Brahman. But in the Abrahamic religions, the starting point is different. God is infinitely removed from the cosmos and infinitely removed from individual souls. That infinite gap, it is not available for souls to evolve and tune in and download that information. It only gets transmitted when God transmits it through a prophet. He has stopped doing that centuries ago. He used to do it, he sent a sequence of prophets, and that's like release 1, then release 2, then release 3, then release 4. And he stopped doing it. And your only recourse is to find that history of that particular release, which only the institution claims to have, and you better get it from this institution. Otherwise, on your own, there is no way you can tune in and download it from God's website because he doesn't do it that way. So this is the issue with history-centrism as a linear sequence of releases that come from God through various prophets, which has ended. No more releases are coming. Either in Christianity, that's final, or in Islam, that's final. So you, the average person, got no direct access. If you bypass, in the case of Islam, somebody says, I don't want anything to do with the Prophet, but I want to be a good Muslim, it's a contradiction. You cannot do that. If in the case of Christianity you say, I'll download this from God by doing some meditation and become a rishi and get it, this is our way of thinking. But it's alien to them, it's not allowed, you are just deluding yourself, and you will go to hell because this is not even possible. So the possibility of somebody who says Tattvamasi, I am that, Aham Brahmasmi, I am Brahman, the possibility exists that I can have that experience, which means that according to our way of looking, that knowledge which the rishis gave us, Shruti we call it, is downloadable by everybody. Everybody. You just have to clean your act, evolve to a certain point, and then you can tune in. But if another ideology is based not on the idea that the self is Satchitanand, but an infinite gap between the self and God, permanent, never bridge gap, then you are a slave of history. And that is the notion of history-centrism that I'm talking about in this book.
My name is Loganathan from Chemistry Department faculty. This question is related to your observation that when we go there to the US or to the West, we feel not so confident. You mentioned that that is the other side. Your children, and generally in US, children go to school, they learn their country's history, and they will be very confident. Also, there was a reference to Macaulay's, Himalayan damage when whatever he did. And I do, and I read that whatever he spoke, which was there in the internet, and I do believe that whatever has been said in the internet has actually happened. So now my question to you is probably not related directly to the book. What you, as a person who has understood all these concepts and you have lived in US, can be done to undo what Macaulay done to India?
Okay, my book is actually a small, humble step in that direction. I am trying to educate through debate with the Westerners. I'm not trying to convert them and change them. I am trying to debate with Westerners for the benefit of my fellow Indians. To show that first of all, stop thinking that everything is same, because it is not according to them. If according to them there is difference, we are fools not knowing our difference. They are asserting difference, educating their difference. It's like saying that, it's like somebody says, my property is mine and your property is ours. Yeah? Kind of. Okay. So why one way? Yeah? So we are fools saying, oh yeah, very good, sound like fun, my property is ours, very good. It's a public park, everybody can enjoy, but everybody else's property is there, This is not a sensible thing to do. And all these people who say we've survived 5,000 years and we'll survive forever, I say this is bunk. For, even 2,000 years ago we were 5 times the size. We were from Afghanistan, not only till Bangladesh, but all the way to Bali. And from Sri Lanka, not only to Kashmir, but Tibet and Kazakhstan, and the Buddhists went to China, Mongolia. Our Dharma civilization was all over Asia. We're maybe 20% of that today. Once one top businessman, industrialist, big famous guy was talking like all people, we are this 5,000, we'll never. So I said to him, I said, sir, suppose you're an industrialist, your chief financial officer comes to you and says, no problem, our market share went down 80%, our income is down to 20%, but we're still eating dal roti, we haven't gone bankrupt, will you be happy? So he said, you're very angry. He said, no, I'll fire the guy. So I said, why is your standard different for your own civilization who's been downsized, and the predators did not even exist 2,000 years ago. They're young civilizations that are expanded, taken more than half the world. And even in the map, even in the country of India, we're not safe now. If there may be further partitions, you may have, and for that I've written the book Breaking India to talk about that. So I feel that the time has come, we must first understand our difference, refuse to get translated and digested into another civilization as second-class citizens, because you become second-class citizens in somebody else's scheme of things. You will never be at par with him in understanding that framework, which is, they have a long history of understanding it. You'll become a second-class person, they'll be the boss, they'll pass judgment on you, you're always trying to impress them. That's what will happen. So I have pointed out 4 or 5 very serious areas of difference, which if you were to read the book, you can understand them, and I would recommend you read each chapter twice. You read a chapter and you pause, understand it, then read it a second time and it will make more sense to you, and then call it a day before you go to the next chapter. So that way you will get these ideas, and then you will start living differently, seeing the world differently, saying that I have certain things about my culture and civilization which I will not negotiate away. They are non-negotiable. I got very happy the gentleman saying, Tamil is non-negotiable for me, good for you. I like that. Because I think Indians have no problem with that. We have never had a problem that somebody else is different. We're okay with it. Our is an open architecture. The internet, and I give these examples. Like in internet, there's so many service providers and so many websites, and as long as I have mine, you got yours, and we're fine. It's not a central mainframe computer model that I control this mainframe and you got dumb terminals, you access me. It's not the central model. It's a very decentralized model. Yeah? And that's why this chapter called Order and Chaos explains that unfortunately the Indian government and Indian media, they use the word, when something is not the organized sector, which for them means corporate Western style organized sector, they call it unorganized. I call it self-organized. Self-organized is a very powerful thing. Self-organized meaning that you're not dependent on a central top-down hierarchy authority to be organized. You organize yourself. So if you organize yourself, it's a very empowering thing. So I feel that there are certain concepts of that kind which are applicable to business leaders, corporate leaders, religious leaders, our individuals. And if we as individuals understand this and refuse to get digested, others will follow. I lived in the United States for 40 years. I am not digested. In fact, I got a line of Westerners wanting to get digested into my civilization. If I wanted to become a different kind of guru than the normal guru, I could convert a whole lot of them. It's just that my calling is different. But it's just up to me to make sure I don't get digested. And living there doesn't make any difference.
I see a very good comparison in philosophical sense with medicine.
Yeah.
Western approach to medicine is lenient.
Yes.
In life, medicine is not lenient.
Yes, correct.
It is complex.
Yes.
All the kind is also wrong.
Yeah, that is correct.
Our human body is existing.
That's correct.
It is very complex.
You see, and the thing is, we have a civilization of complexity, and we have a mind that can handle complexity. I've done studies, very interesting. I look at Indian post office clerk and US post office clerk. So the Indian post office clerk, a lot of people he's handling same time. He takes this guy's money, and as he goes to handle the money, he's bringing the thing back to this guy, and then he's listening to these three guys, and he's arguing with that fellow. Now, the American post office clerk is very ticked off at any such behavior. He says, I'll do the whole transaction beginning to end, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, whatever the thing is, one guy, before he even start talking to anybody. So this linear thinking is there. Now linear thinking also has its advantages, because in certain endeavors you better be organized. You better know how to follow orders. If you are in an army, you cannot say I'll do my own improvisation. Sir, I am improvised soldier. So I'll improvise my fighting. You can't do that. There's something called, teamwork, and there's something called individual creativity. Indians are different from Chinese in their character, because Chinese are not individually oriented, creative, self-organized. They need all the taxi drivers in a huge city would have one employer, their employees. So they're not figuring out clever ways of getting ahead and doing their thing, because they just have a job. It's like a job, sarkari job, government. Whereas the entrepreneur here, even rickshawala, he's got his own business. He's got his own business. The street vendor, he's got his own business. So improvised, individual thinking, decentralized, these are some of our characteristics which come out in leadership, in business, in all kinds of ways. But we should have both. That is what the Samudra Manthan is about, order and chaos. We should also know how to be orderly when that is required, and not be sort of too much dissenting and too much fighting and too sort of fragmented and anarchical. That is a tendency that we have, which is a kind of a weakness.
Sir, my question is rather factual. Do you think the ancient Indian civilization has had a stronger scientific foundation than the West? And if so, can you give the examples?
See, it's a huge subject. I'm glad you had this interest. My foundation started a 20-volume series called History of Indian Contributions to Science and Technology. An IIT Kanpur professor who unfortunately passed away, Balasubramaniam, he was a metallurgist. He's done on the Delhi Iron Pillar and the Indian history of steel. We have Indian metallurgy was pioneered the disport of pure zinc through distillation for hundreds of years. Enough records on that. You look at textiles, you look at the advanced manufacturing of construction tiles in Harappa. You look at they had a binary weight system in Harappa. The weights were relative 1:2:4 like that. So you see a huge amount of very systematic scientific thinking happening in India. I have no doubt that a large amount of the Western scientific progress actually sent from India, and there is evidence of transmission of calculus or pre-calculus. Infinite series came from India. There's a Kerala school which had a lot of infinite series mathematics, and the concept of infinitesimal, which is quite a breakthrough coming out of here, which is pre-calculus, as you all know. That's how they create the idea of calculus and so on. So Indian contributions have been have been enormous. India, when India got invaded, all kinds of universities and centers of learning got destroyed, and the people who invaded, they are not interested in learning, they are just interested in milking the system, and the system had a huge amount of wealth until 1750, according to the Cambridge History of World Economics. There's a World Economics multi-volume Cambridge History. They've done this. Until 1750, India had 24% of world GDP, and the West, as defined in United States and Europe combined, had less than, say, 7-8%. India was a bigger economy than the West by 3 times. And in 90 years, India got deindustrialized down to less than 2% of world GDP, and the West became more than 80%. So you have to understand the history of what happened in that period. What happened in that period, the dismantling of education, the dismantling of manufacturing. There was a guy called Dharampal. He was a Gandhian, and we gave him a Lifetime Achievement Award soon before he died, some years ago. As a young man, he sailed to England to go to the East India Company office, and there was no fax, photocopy type system in those days. He had to manually transcribe volumes and volumes. He spent years and years, 10 hours a day in the library, to copy the British East India Company records of things happening in India, because they would never publish it, because why would they publish these things? He copied them, and he produced multiple volumes on some of the things that happened in the 1800s in India under colonial rule, when technology and manufacturing were disassembled and brought down and outlawed. You know, steel was an Indian innovation. Even in very early times, Greek records and Roman records show that the toughest steel for using it as armament for a shield and for a sword they would buy from India. It was called wood steel, W-O-O-T-Z, steel. And this steel they could not make, but it was brought from India. That's how steel was. British learned a lot of, they did a lot of R&D to understand how steel is made. And another interesting thing few people know is that when London Bridge was being constructed, the East India Company concluded that the best steel to make it would be imported from India. A large part of the London Bridge steel was from India, even that's the London Bridge today. Now, the steel industry in India was outlawed on the basis that people can make guns and they can use it for weapons and it will be hostile, all kind of arguments given, and it was outlawed, steel industry. And this Jamshedji Tata, who was the founder of Tata, had to plead with the British for a very long time to get permission to start Tata Iron and Steel. And the permission was given for only a very small quantity of license that we could build only so much, because the British didn't want competition. So for a very long time, Indian steel industry disappeared. It all had to be imported. And then Jamshedji Tata started one small unit. That's all there was. So, you know, when you look at what has happened to science and technology, I'm very sad that I spent so many years developing this 20-volume series, out of which 9 volumes are ready. I tried to convince Penn IIT, why don't IIT people take this up? It's not my job, I'm one guy. Why don't IIT people introduce a course on history of Indian science and technology so that technocrats know all this? Why don't they take over the publishing of these books, because it's very difficult for me to go around, marketing these books. Penn IIT or IIT or some particular IIT should take over the project. I'll be more than happy to donate, contribute all the work I've done over 15 years with the help of so many scholars, 30 or 40 scholars that we've funded, so that the work can continue, so that future generations can understand the history of Indian science and technology. Because nobody else is going to do it for you. It's the Indian people who are going to do it. So what better place than an IIT to have such a project? I started this entirely on my own, and I haven't got any support from anybody. But your question is a very important question on Indian contributions to science and technology, which are not adequately understood and appreciated. And it takes 3 years for each of those volumes. Some expert professor somewhere in India, some technocrat, some historian have to work together to, each volume takes that long to do. But there is a wealth of information in that.
My friend and I were discussing yesterday about unity in diversity. and whether it works. And your talk about how the need to be different from the West, but at the same time we have to have, we can't be too sharp in our differences with each other, right? So what is your take on this unity in diversity?
So, chapter 3 of this book is called Integral Unity and Synthetic Unity. One of the persons commenting explained it very nicely. There are two ideas of unity I'm contrasting. The Indian ideas are calling it integral unity, and the Western idea I'm calling it synthetic unity. Integral unity means there is an underlying unity which pre-exists, and out of that manifests diversity. So the diversity does not have to be artificially put together to unify it, because it came out of the unity. It's an organic system. Synthetic unity is that initially there's only separate things. They exist separately. So a car is synthetic unity because tire is made and battery is made and paint is made and then they're put together. So a synthetic unity is sort of an assembly job, and it always has the risk of falling apart. Therefore, the obsession of control and aggression to keep it together, because the fear that it will fall apart is always there, because there is no inherent unity. Whereas in an integral unity, the unity is inherent, you can't even destroy it even if you wanted to, because that's the nature of reality. So we call it Brahman, Buddhists have a different term for it, but that integral unity is common to all Dharma traditions. That is a very important point in this book. That in the existence of integral unity in our philosophy, cosmology, metaphysics means we can be as diverse as we want, but deep down underneath all this diversity, that unity is so fundamental to the nature of the cosmos that it can't be taken away. So we don't have an obsession to keep forcing a unity and keep making you like me or keep worrying that you're not like me. That difference anxiety is not there because of the integral unity. Therefore, there's no reason for difference anxiety. Whereas in the Western system, it is called the atomic worldview. So different entities exist separately from each other. It is a Newtonian Cartesian model of the physical world, and the Judeo-Christian model in a spiritual sense, in a theological sense, is also separation of God and humans and cosmos and all that. So when you are starting with separate things and then you're trying to figure out how to unify them, then you're always going to have to keep unifying them. You're always worrying that they may not be kept together. You're going to become a control freak. You're going to become very aggressive. Anything that is not part of this unity is an outsider. You either have to genocide him or kill him or include him, colonize him and force him in. So this whole behavior of this kind of the Western behavior stems from the synthetic unity that they have assumed. And our relaxed nature vis-a-vis the diversity and what they think is chaos, okay, that relaxed attitude comes from, and the lack of difference anxiety comes from the underlying unity that we do not have to do anything about because it's already there. So that's how deep is the unity and diversity philosophical idea of India. I'll give you some bad news. The bad news is when we adopt the Western colonized frame of mind, we destroy ourselves. And so what has happened is a huge colonization of Western philosophy, Western sociology, Western ways of thinking, even Western aesthetics of what constitutes beauty. That is happening. I have collected, during my visits to India, I've come to India every year 4 times, for 40 years. Every year I've come, because I have projects here and there, learn, whatever, relatives, and I visit, and I don't just sit in Delhi where my family is, I go everywhere and learn, understand things. So I found that, and I collect magazine ads. People wonder why you're collecting magazine ads. So I collect the ads that women read magazine and men, jewelry, fashion, undergarments, this, that. And I do it as a reflection on what society is like at a given point. It's very interesting. Since the 70s when I left, the models used are more like white. The attitudes of the man, what kind of clothes he's wearing or what kind of value system he has, is westernized. So it's not only in philosophy, it's also in aesthetics. The idea of aesthetics is shifted. So this is going to have its cost in puncturing and destroying this integral unity, because you're bringing a synthetic unity model here. And the book Breaking India, which came before this, talks about the fault lines that are being created and exacerbated in India with a whole lot of interventions coming from various places. And that causes a disruption, a kind of breakup in the unity and diversity model. So while I'm on the one hand very happy and proud that this exists in our philosophy, on the other hand I'm also worried that it may not be that secure, considering that we are forgetting all this and moving in another direction.
5 days ago, I didn't know who you were. My colleague mentioned your name and Breaking India and being different. I went on the net. Over the past 1 year, I've been reading a little bit of mythology, quite a bit of mythology, and finding a sense of pride within it. And I was reading quantum physics some time back. And I went on your site and went into your research on indianscience.org and downloaded all the papers. In the last 3 days, I've read most of them. In 1 hour today, what I've learned about various religions, I didn't know in 38 years of my life. So, great work. I'm sure this book will be an eye-opener for many of us, youngsters or not so young. And I truly wish, as you said, someone should teach it. Because the sense of pride, you mentioned somewhere in your blogs that India is open to embracing the West, but it has to first learn to embrace itself.
Yeah. That's a very good comment. Thank you very much for that. My feeling is that I'm trying to encourage people to understand our civilization, create a sense of unity in diversity amongst ourselves, and be world citizens, very proud world citizens, always respecting others but demanding respect for ourselves. I call this mutual respect, which means I respect you, but I want you to respect me also. I am not imposing on you that you are inferior, you should be like me, and I don't want you to do that to me. It's a level playing field. I mean, that's pretty fair. We got to teach it to our kids. Idea is I want to get into academics, I want to get into spiritual groups, and the idea is to educate corporate leaders how to project our civilization in their dealings around the world. You see, the East India Company started the study of Indology in Europe, not because they loved us, not because it was fun, but because studying somebody gives you power over them. If I study you and map you in my framework, and in fact I even convince you that you should think of yourself the way I'm thinking of you, I get a lot of power over you. So this is the only way to reverse it, is that we have to do it in reverse. That's the problem. That's the challenge. Now I live in the US, and I must say I'm very disappointed in my other fellow diaspora people who are making huge amount of money, many times what I'm making, but they're living the good life. They have no sense of a higher cause than just accumulating, which to me is so boring, such a boring life after a while. And they are also mixed up on, are we here, are we there, and all of that. So they're not fully accepted as whites. If you ever think that Western universalism, being digested into Western universalism is a great idea, then you have to look at the fact that the diaspora people who are even billionaires still have this Indian identity out of necessity, because they're still going to be second class. I mean, Harvard will take Tata's $50 million donation and put it on their building and give him honor. People are trying as hell with all their money to kind of buy their way in or become honorary whites, but at the end of the day, you're going to be second class because they know that system, they know their system better, and you're going to be resident there. So we have to do like the Chinese do. The Chinese are claiming an alternative pole in world power, not under the West, not beholden to the West under their umbrella in Western universalism, but creating their own. And Japanese showed this long ago that we can be modern, technocrats, world class, but remain Japanese, and Japanese never gave up that sense of who they are. You can also be vulnerable. If you are very self-organized, but an army comes that is highly centrally organized, and they'll take orders, commands from a central authority, and they'll do it, and you guys will debate and discuss and do Purva Paksha and argue and all that, you may be a more creative lot, you may be a more evolved lot, your art will be superior, dance, music and all that will be superior, but those guys, as far as brute force is concerned, may actually come and beat you. So I think we have several problems. One of the problems historically over the last 1,000 years is invader after invader came. We did not do Purva Paksha on them to figure out who are they, why are they here, what's their mindset. Let's send scholars to Makkah and Iran and Turkey and come back with social sciences and philosophy and comparative thought and tell us what's their mindset like. We should have been educating our people about them like they were learning from us, learning about us. And even when the Europeans came, we never sent our scientists to figure out in France and Germany and England what are they all like and come and teach us in our centers of learning. So the Chinese, on the other hand, the Chinese were always translating European thought into Mandarin. This is very interesting, you should know that. When Hegel would produce something, within 10 years, the Chinese emperor would have it translated into Mandarin, make sure all the Chinese thinkers know this is the European thought. When Voltaire was writing stuff, Mandarin editions were available. We did not translate European thought, Islamic thought, to study it as the other. They translated us into their framework. We were very happy to even help them. Our Pandits actually helped them translate. But we didn't gaze at them because it was either arrogance, we thought we were too superior, we thought we were not vulnerable. So we just never bothered to study what their mindset is and what they're all about, what is their intentions. This is the problem. So I'm trying to introduce a new genre of learning among our thinkers and leaders, which I call reversing the gaze. Reverse the gaze on our own terms, study them.
All our culture has been recorded, is in our literature, and our people are not familiar with this literature. So how do we take these notions into public, into general masses?
So you're pointing out the faults, the deficiency in our education system, and it's a very, very serious problem that we kind of adopted a self-hate education system and did not learn that other countries are not doing that to themselves. They are really teaching their youth all these good things. And I am not a politician. I do not know what I can do. All I can do is keep writing books, and if there's enough people reading them, enough people writing about them, I'd like you to join my discussion group. I need more voices. I want to create a sort of a thought revolution which makes these kind of points so that people do listen, and people will listen when there's enough people raising hell. Media is also not promoting something like this. If I were to write a book which is kind of critical of our civilization and talking about all kind of issues, I would get many more publishers, many more media, NDTV would interview me, they would promote me, all kind of things would happen. I'm telling you that. There's a serious mental block, and this kind of work is very hard work intellectually, it's very hard work politically to stick your neck out, it's risky, you get threats, you are boycotted and put on the margins and become an untouchable, that this guy is bad, dangerous, God knows what he's up to. This is a very thankless job, and it can only be done if you really don't care what they're saying, and this is your calling in life, and you want to do it. That's the only way you can keep going. So I hope that others will be there in some quantity to join in this sort of an effort. But it's a very long-term effort, and the alternative is we'll be finished and digested, so we can't give up either.